Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a very hot evening here in London at the Photographers Gallery. My name is Brett Rogers, and I am the director of the Photographers Gallery. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all here to the first of a series of 3 talks, the next ones of which will take place in September, exploring the ongoing legacy of the Photography Prize, which this year celebrates its 25th anniversary. Just before I introduce the 3 artists who are going to speak tonight with the curator of the Deutsche Börse Photography Foundation Prize, Anna Dannemann, I'd just like to take the opportunity to say a few words about the history of the prize and to thank our partners, Anne-Marie Beckmann and the Deutsche Börse Photography Foundation, for their invaluable support, which has been now ongoing for the last 17 years. Founded in 1996 by my predecessor, some of you will know, Paul Womble, and originally known by its then title sponsor as the Citibank Photography Prize, the prize was developed in response to the paradigm shift taking place in photography during the mid-1990s, which was then recognizing that it had been incorporated into the broader visual arts world. Paul Womble's vision was to introduce the British public to those artists whom he and his jury members considered were critical to this transformation in the wider understanding of the medium. And so this prize, which recognizes a substantial body of work produced in the medium of photography that is judged to have made the most significant contribution to photography during a 12-month period, was born. For the first decade, the exclusive focus of the prize was on exhibitions. Only later did it also come to recognize the importance of the photo book. This is an interesting fact because 2 of the 3 artists who are speaking for us tonight were nominated for books initially rather than exhibitions. So tonight we will have the pleasure of hearing from Pieter Hugo, who was nominated in 2012 for his publication Permanent Error, which looked at technological waste and the impact of industrial disposal in Africa. Laia Abril, who was nominated in 2019 for her book On Abortion, the first of her trilogy, which looked at the ethics and morality that create the unsafe conditions for women seeking abortion. And finally, Donovan Wylie, who was nominated in 2010 for his series The Maze, which looked at the historical and religious identity and conflict in Northern Ireland in exhibition form, but had an accompanying book, for which I always recall Donovan saying that at the time, the highlight to then of his photographic career was spending time at Stadel in Germany watching that book being printed. So thank you to all the artists for agreeing to take part in tonight's conversation and to all of you for attending. Please make sure you do keep in touch with us about the future events in September and book for them on the 14th and 16th of September. One of those will be chaired by Anne-Marie Beckmann, the director of the Deutsche Börse Photography Foundation, and the other one will be chaired by me. We look forward to announcing fairly soon the lineup of the 3 artists for each of those talks. I'd like now to hand over to Anna Dannemann to chair tonight's conversation. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Brett, for this lovely introduction. I think the idea of today's talk is, or the time schedule, I should say, is that we're going to hear a short presentation by each of the 3 artists, and then we'll have a discussion between ourselves and then invite questions from all of you as well. We're going to start with Laia Abril's presentation. So Laia, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. So glad to be here. I don't know why I'm more nervous than usual. I was thinking about it, and I have a feeling it's because it was only 20 months ago, maybe a little bit more, 2 years, that we had the show at the Photographers Gallery with the project on abortion. And I just realized that today I had to think about what I have done since then, which means I have to think about what I have done during COVID and in these 2 years. So it all started in 2015, actually, with my research on my new long-term project, which is a history of misogyny. And On abortion, which is the first chapter, is the one that I was nominated with Deutsche Börse, and it was shown at the Photographer's Gallery. And it's very interesting to think about it after all these years, because many of the decisions that I took when I first started, some of them remain there, but then I have evolved a lot in my methodology and in my practice and my approach. And today I will be able to show you a little bit of the second project, the second chapter that I have done in the past years. One thing that is one of those things that I discovered when talking about my projects is that even if the project is very global and pretends to think about a history of misogyny in a global perspective and a historical perspective, there is always one trigger that is connected to something that happens near to me that somehow strikes my curiosity and makes me reflect on what it means for everybody else. And with an abortion was very clear. It was in 2013 when the Spanish government tried to restrict more the abortion law. And it was the first time that I realized that also can happen to me. And, from a very privileged European country in the sense of having access to abortion nowadays. But as we all know, that is something that it can just change in a second. And with that in mind, and having a former background in journalism and research being the base of the way I work, I decided to take the angle of what it happens when you have no access to abortion. So I look back at what was going on in 2015 regarding to the loss of abortion. And my first reaction as a former documentary photographer was to think, okay, I should go to all these countries in red with all these restrictions that are affecting all these people. But I didn't have the resources to do that first. But also, I was not a historian. I was not a sociologist. I was not either a journalist or a documentary photographer anymore. So as an artist, what could be my role? And I think that's a very interesting question, that if something has evolved since I first showed the work at the Photographer's Gallery 2 years ago, is also I've been thinking a lot on what's my role and what it means to do this kind of work. At that time, one thing that I realized is that the invisibility of repercussions of not having access to abortion was something that I could try to do because there was no images of that. So I decided to create first an exhibition and actually later the book on abortion, and trying to focus in all those repercussions and trying to come to create a space where we could think about that, even though you were not in the same page as I was politically speaking. And, having more than 47,000 women dying because of not having access to abortion in 2018, 19, 20, 21 was something that didn't make much sense to me. So at the Photographer's Gallery, you could see a small proportion of that because we have this group show. But I think it was really interesting to at least represent pieces of my different approach and how to visualize something that is not only invisible because it happened in the past, but it's also invisible because all the ethics around it, and also because often it's more conceptual than something that actually happens in front of you and you can photograph that. What had happened after with that project, it's something, if you want, we can talk a little bit more later when we have the group discussion. I just have 5 more minutes now, and I want to really to talk about what happened after. And after it happened, the second chapter, which is on rape. And actually, I'm much more interested in showing things that no one wants to see and things that they are not pretty much being shown in the media, and it's not like a part of the news agenda to talk about it. But actually, when I first started this research, it was during the Me Too movement, during the peak of the Me Too movement. And it was actually against it, because suddenly everybody was talking about rape. I was the Weinstein case, the Me Too was happening. And there was a very special case again in Spain that it really changed everything for me. This was the case of La Manada. I'm not sure if you have heard about it, but basically 5 men in their 40s gang raped a young woman in her 80-year-old young woman during some festivities in the north of Spain, and they actually record the whole thing. And in the trial, the first sentence only accused them of abuse, so they could not they could avoid going to jail, even though everything was filmed. So in terms of laws, everything started to be under a perspective of a very different way of thinking that happened before, and suddenly everybody was in the streets. And why talking about something that suddenly is all over the news and everybody's talking about it, if my mission in a way is talking about things that people don't want to see? So I realized not only obviously what happened with those 5 men have failed us, but the institutions failed us as a society. And no one was talking about the institutions, and everything that was in the media were the faces of the victims. And those faces and those people were being, retrial and in the, basically they were going through the whole thing all over and over, because all the pressure on having to speak up about the subject was again on the victims instead of the perpetrators in this case. So I found that it was very interesting to try to switch the focus and the pressure of being shown faces of those people having to go under, and trying to focus on the institutions. That's how the first part of the project was born, and I decided I wanted to focus on the rape cultures, that they were, not only allowing these things to happen, but also failing in the time of justice, when afterwards they have to respond to it. And with the first shows, you can see, this first way of showing this aspect. I decided to focus on making portraits that they were somehow forcing us in a kind of a social accountability to put ourselves in front of the cultures and basically trying to understand that we are part of the problem. It could be the marriage culture, it could be the military, it could be religious, it could be the prison. And I guess it was with this image that everything makes sense. That always happens also when I'm working. Since the projects are very organic in terms of research, it's also quite interesting how my evolution and my knowledge and my role and my positions of the subject is something that is evolving. That's why it's so hard for me to talk about it when it's not yet done. And I remember wanting to photograph these pieces of clothes that they were representing the institution. So I would take care of the victims, and I would also switch this focus, and I would try the audience to try to think a little bit more about the society and us as part of the society. When I was photographing this little school uniform, this belongs to a 4-year-old girl from Colombia. And obviously the testimonies and the text, which is a very important part of my work in both chapters, they were referring, in this case, the mother was speaking, obviously, because she's only 4 years old, not only what happened, actually not what happened to her when she was attacked, but also how the society didn't want to listen to her. The school didn't fire the teacher, the media didn't want to listen to her. Obviously, all the school public system and the juristic system was also trying to avoid to talk about it. So it was during this process that history, that in the first chapters had helped me to show you this comparison between the present and the past, to make us realize that can happen, that restriction about abortion laws could happen to us tomorrow. In this case, the history component would help me to understand the origin of all of this, which is at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do with all my projects is trying to understand why all these things happen. So obviously, I don't aim to have a solution, and I don't think that's my purpose. But in a way, even though this might look as an activism work, I actually do all of this for myself. And it actually gives me some kind of calm trying to understand, again, how this happens and where is it coming from. Actually, I'm saying this, but at the same time, this has been a very complicated chapter. The book should be already out, but it's not. Obviously, the COVID didn't help, but we're trying to have it this year for Paris Photo. But I think one of the reasons why also, besides the fact that the world just changed because of what happened in the last 2 years, I also changed doing this chapter. The first chapter was aimed to be shown to people who might not agree with what I was thinking, but I wanted to create a space where we could all reflect about the subject. The second chapter had the intention on trying to switch the focus and to reflect also how photography and showing trauma, the pain of others, and how we portray them also has an impact, not only on the audience and the subject, but also in them. I think I'm much more present in this second chapter. I think anger and frustration and a lot of feelings that I couldn't really deal with in the way that I maybe could with the first chapter also have changed my methodology and my work, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. But obviously it's something that it's different, and I'm looking forward to try to explain that in the new book once I finish. And I think I run out of time, but that's a lot of information already. Hopefully it was understandable. Sorry, I'm trying to stop sharing the screen. Yeah. So
thank you so much, Laia. That was fantastic. What a great overview. And thank you for sharing about the kind of current projects as well that you're working on. It was great. Now over to Pieter Hugo. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am not going to be speaking about the Deutsche Börse Prize or the year I was nominated per se. It seems so long ago, I hardly even remember it. But I'm going to take this opportunity to speak about the work that I have been making over the last 20 months while I've been stuck in South Africa. This is the longest I've been in one place in over 27 years. And during this period, along with all the intensity that has come from being a parent with kids out of school, not being able to travel, Donald Trump's presidency, which inflated all dialogue to a kind of a fever pitch of hysteria, and along with the Black Lives Movement, it just felt to me as a white male artist as a good time to just step back a bit and reevaluate and take a look at my practice and what I am doing and how I approach it and evaluate my position in it. I started a body of work before COVID began, which was over the last few years, I've been dabbling and doing some fashion work for publications. And often while doing fashion work, I would look at the casting photographs of the models that I'd be photographing and find them to be so much more interesting than I would find the kind of identical style portraits of the models so much more interesting than what they ended up after they had gone through the machinations of fashion, of wardrobe and makeup and hair, etc. And there was one particular casting agency called Midland that I'd been working with, that had been doing casting for me. And they have very much been at the forefront of what I like to call atypical beauty, a shift that's been happening in aesthetics. And I found this fascinating. I mean, I'm very attracted to asymmetry. I find uniqueness beautiful. So I had photographed it helping them with their casting in New York, London, and in Paris. And I was supposed to do one more session of it in Madrid. And COVID happened and I couldn't go on with it. And so I sat on the work and in the end decided to help them to get me to cast in South Africa. And I ended up finishing the work in Johannesburg and in Cape Town. And I will share some of that work with you now. You guys all seeing the screen fine?
Yes, we can see it. All good.
So in one way, this work is very much work that is looking out into the world and has a curiosity at its core and going around scratching and looking for uniqueness out there. During COVID, I switched my focus to my family and started photographing my children and working collaboratively with them on a long-term project. It fits into a larger project that I've been busy with for many, many years. And I will show you some of that after this. Is the screen up? No.
No, the screen is now. I can see you. I can't see the. Now it's done.
Okay, can you see the screen now?
No.
So when COVID happened, I'm actually here at the moment. We moved to the countryside. We have a house in the countryside on the coast of South Africa. It's super isolated. And yeah, I decided to turn the camera inward. But still very much, my work is very much still dealing with interrogating the portrait, and the various facets of it. And there we go. That's it. That's what I've been up to for the last year.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was great. What a personal, wonderful project. I mean, if I call it, it's lovely. Donovan Wylie next. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Can you unmute me, or do I unmute myself?
You are unmuted. We can hear you.
Okay, and so you got my presentation there, right?
Louisa, do you have it? Yeah, there we go.
So actually, I am going to talk about the Deutsche Börse Award, basically because it was an enormous builder for me in terms of my own development as a practitioner, as a researcher, as a photographer, and as an artist. I never expected. Please go to the next slide. I never expected to ever be even nominated or shortlisted for this award. Next slide, please. These are examples from the time where I was part of this, seems so long ago. This is Sophie Wistelhuber's installation. Next slide, please. And this is the work that I was shortlisted for. Next slide, please. And what's critical is that I think I was shortlisted because there was a context and a subject and concept and methodology that all worked together. I mean, I say that in retrospect, but it was such an honor. It was such an honor. Next slide, please. And I think that without that, I think that's one of the things the award gave me, was this belief that you can continue to develop. And as an artist, no matter your practice, that is a critical thing that you need, the confidence to develop, the confidence and the criticality to develop. And the award, unlike many other awards, I'm not trying to sell the award, but I genuinely, I think this is what this was all about, this session. There's millions of awards, but the only one I wanted was the Deutsche Börse Award. You know, it's like the Turner Prize, or I didn't want Pictor or whatever. I wanted the criticality of the medium, the new work, the new originality. That's what excited me. And when I was shortlisted, I was like, wow, you know, and I sort of feel that is the balance of the award. That is the responsibility of the award. That is the strength of the award. What it can bring to new young people who are trying to experiment and bring their own voice, their own context, their own criticality, their own methodology, which is what I was taught. And that award just kind of said, okay, well done, you did that. and it really filled me up. So next slide, please. So I was also part of that award included this thing called Scrapbook, this book that I made, a book that is called a scrapbook, and it's not really enabled to exist. It's supposed to fall apart. Next slide, please. And here's an example of it. Next slide, please. This is an installation shot from the award. I think this is from Frankfurt. Next slide, please. Yes, and so, you know, a lot of what I learned from working in those days was collaboration. Much of my work isn't done in individuality, it is done in collaboration. Next slide, please. So while I was doing that work, I was also doing this work, which is called British Watchtowers, which is basically I was looking at prison infrastructure in an open landscape. Next slide, please. And these are the architectures that I was photographing. And next slide, please. And you know, while I was doing it, I was learning this whole culture of architecture and conflict. Next slide, please. And that led me to look at how architectures that I grew up with led to new architectures in foreign places that questioned my ideas of history and questioned my ideas of even empire and context. And I found myself in a kind of whole conversation of ideas. Next slide, please. This is another example from the Outpost work. So I was going from green landscape to desert. Next slide, please. To, you know, and the armed forces here in Afghanistan who were Canadian from the British were leaving Afghanistan and more concerned about their own context of northern Canada and the Northwest Passage, where global warming is impacting the travel through waters. Next slide, please. So security moves from sand to water, to ice, and as an artist, I think at this point I felt my whole story was done and I was ready to let it go and say I'm done. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this all accumulated in this sort of trilogy, and I want to make it clear that this trilogy would not have happened without having that, I guess, critical acceptance by the Deutsche Börse Award, because the Deutsche Börse Award for me was always about the criticality of the medium, pushing the medium forward with all its history, with all its context. And I'm so grateful to the award. And Sophie Wüstenhöfer, who won that year for me, I hugged her immediately and said, "You're the one," and she definitely was. And I think that this award really is about, you know, accepting the limitations and pushing the limitations of the medium of photography in a not just a European sense, but in a global sense. Next slide, please. Yep, next slide. So this became a whole thing. So after I did this work, I kind of thought I'm done. I've nothing more to say. Next slide, please. And oh yes, so this was recently shown at the Irish Museum of Modern Art. And I'm talking about empire. I'm not making any political statement, but I am talking about history. So this first image on the left is Northern Ireland. What image in the middle is the Arctic. The image in the right is Afghanistan. But if you put the three images together, it's like an Irish flag, green, white, gold. And it is a context of the idea of humanity and the impulse of empire. Next slide, please. So yeah, so I basically gave up and thought I'm done and time to retire. And but I was invited by Yale Museum of Art to come to America and try to make some work, which I did. It was a 2-week residency which turned into a 3-year residency, a museum show, a double publication. Next slide, please. I worked in collaboration with Jim Goldberg, which was amazing. And we were both working from sort of opposite ends, but yet finding a middle ground. They were completely independent works, but there was a conversation between us. I was talking about the idea of promise in the context of the myth of empire, and he was talking about the idea of betrayal. Next slide, please. Sorry, forgive me for the quality. This is one of my images from that series. Next slide, please. This is one of Jim's images. So we were working very much in conversation and very contextually rooted. Jim was a man from New Haven, sort of ran away from it to California. I was an Irishman trying to understand America and come to America. So that was kind of what happened to me after the Arctic work, which I saw as a blank page where you can start again. And I thought, well, if you're going to start again, start in America. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this was the result of our collaboration. And one thing I've learned in photography, you're not just this isolated voice or practitioner. It's a complete collaboration. It's a complete production with many people. In fact, in my notes, I said, start with saying, thank everybody who's been part of what you've done, because there's so many people involved. It is like film, the film industry. They're maybe not to the same degree, but it is a very, very collaborative process. Next slide, please. Takes me to my last image, which is a new project, which is actually finished and hopefully will be in the world soon. And it has also led to new work. This work goes right back to the very beginning of what I've done. It's about separation. It's about closeness. It's about distance. It's about breaking up, wanting to be together. So this image is a photograph taken of a lighthouse in Calais, France, from the cliffs of Dover in England. And I've done a whole spectrum of these images, and I hope the world will see it soon. But I just would like to finally say that the Photographers Gallery, and I'm not trying to, God, it's not like I'm trying to sell something. I sincerely mean this. The Photographers Gallery and the Deutsche Börse, they enabled my creativity. And I hope whatever I've done after I was a finalist is subject to high criticality and good worth. And I, really, without that acceptance, I don't think I would have continued, genuinely. Well, I guess that's maybe my fault, but it was a huge impact, huge impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Donovan. What a wonderful, we could stop right here. That's it. That's the end of the discussion. No, thank you all three so much for your wonderful presentations about giving us a glimpse of your practices and what you've been up to during COVID, but also after the prize and just a glimpse of what you have been achieving throughout those years within the medium of photography. I kind of think I have to kind of roll it back a little bit to the beginning of the prize as well, because one of the reasons it was founded, as Brett kind of mentioned in the beginning, was I kind of like to see it almost as an emancipation process of the medium as well. It kind of goes hand in hand with in the 1990s with this idea of photography not being just like this third-rated kind of something everyone can do, but something that is a really crucial art form that might be able to say something about the times we live in a different and more appropriate way, in the complexity of the times, in a very unique way. And I think that it kind of started in the 90s. There's no surprise about that. And one of the aims was obviously to highlight innovation, as I think all of you have said in some ways, but also the idea of new developments, and to just offer artists a platform to show their work, to consider, but also for audiences to consider photography more as bodies of work, more as these are complex ways of working. And I think that in that way, in the history of the prize, it almost reflects how also the medium has changed, how the medium has developed. And I guess that if you simplify it in some ways, there's this idea of art photography, documentary photojournalism, and then these kind of bodies of work that you kind of live in between. Is that those concepts, are these things that you in your art making, and obviously it's fantastic to see how that breadth of the prize as well. This is not a prize that is for documentary photography. It's not a prize that's just for a big retrospective or for a specific theme, but it kind of incorporates all of that. But there is this idea of it can reflect the medium. It can reflect the medium and what the medium can do. So are these kind of concepts of photography something that you are dealing with while making your work, or you have been grappling with?
And are you making a general?
No, I'm trying to see if the three of you have a response to that.
The beauty of photography, it's not really about photography. It's about visual perception, and we use cameras but visual perception is so, that's where it began, photography, and that won't go, that will not go, and it needs to be built upon and extended. I think photography is one of the most liberating, powerful mediums that exist. You have this simple machine, you trust it, and you go out in the world and you have no idea what's going to happen. It's extraordinary. Peter, what do you think, Peter? Come help me out here.
No, sorry, I want to come back to something just on a broader sense of the DB prize. I mean, it's being nominated in many ways it's not as good as winning, but there's a validation in it that's incredible, that is incredibly reassuring and gives one impetus to continue making work if one was in a space of doubt. I do think, though, and this is a broader, maybe not a problem, but something that needs to be clarified, is people's understanding of the Deutsche Börse Prize. The prize is for a contribution, an innovation made in Europe in photography during a year. Most people do not read the prize as such. Most people, and you will see this when you see comment sections in reviews of the prize in newspapers or journals, most people view the prize as a lifetime achievement award.
Which that's not what it is.
Which in fact it was not what it is, I know. Which I think is something
the beauty of the prize was that it's something you aspire to.
Laia, help us out here. What do you think?
I mean, it's interesting because I have a very love-hate relationship with photography for a long time, even with the label photographer, never use it my own. And for a long time, I thought it was because I was not a good enough photographer. And then I started to realize that I was pretty much obsessed on trying to show things that they were invisible. So that's not easy for anyone, even if you're not the most amazing photographer. But actually the award that I won, one award that I won with the same project as I was nominated with the Deutsche Börse, they were discussing I heard that they were discussing in the jury meeting. Some people were against because they said that what I was doing was not photography. So it's really interesting, because if I have to think about three things that for me are important with the Deutsche Börse, was the first one is when I first started photographing, and I also kind of start to avoid the documentary photography, WordPress photo sort of places I didn't feel comfortable because of the subject I was treating. I remember going through the list of winners of the Deutsche Börse and actually seeing female names, which I've never seen before, actually winning. And that changed everything, because suddenly means that it's possible. And, you know, I remember that very well many years ago. Then I remember being nominated, what that meant. In a year that actually a lot of good things were happening to the project, for me was a massive validation in a political level as well, because even though I have many people saying they love the project, not many people have, you know, can afford to showcase or give money or support the project that sometimes they were gonna bring negative effects on them, which actually happened. And the third one was actually the last one Anna was mentioning, realizing that photography is not only the act of taking pictures, and my methodology is research-based. I work with many kinds of visuals. Text is as important as images. And at the end of the day, and as Donovan said, is also a perspective, no? And taking advantage of the visual aspect and the power of how visuals also affect people when they're looking at the subject. Obviously now with all the shapes and forms visual has, which are evolving as we are in 2021. But yeah, it made me reconcile myself. Do you say that? Like having some reconciliation with photography and photography. So that's what it means to me.
I think that misconception is this idea of a lifetime achievement award, or this idea of being nominated and being chosen has also a lot to do with how the prize is kind of set up, that it is a double nomination process. Yes, you have to have a publication or an exhibition within Europe, and then someone that is part of the academy must have seen it and felt it was the most outstanding project within that year, to then put it forward for consideration of a jury that then selects the shortlist. So there is a lot of this idea of validation in the kind of photographic scene, I think, because it's like it has to go through almost these filtering processes again and again and again, and then it squeezes out those four shortlisted artists.
I think Anna, the strength of the award was always that it was trying to be somewhere that it was trying to get to. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the beauty of the award. It was, I mean, that's what I found really attractive about it. It was trying to get to somewhere that maybe you can't get to. Mm-hmm. And that's what awards are. Awards are not about celebration. Award should be about, you know, getting to a destination. And that's what I loved about the Citibank and the Deutsche Börse. It was, and is, it's about getting to a place that you maybe don't know if you can get to. And yeah, and I think that's the beauty of photography. You know, it's so flawed and so strong that you have to keep kind of interrogating it, you know, and working it, and that's what I love about the Deutsche Börse. I mean, the Turner Prize is something similar in terms of an ambition, and there's no other photography prize in the world like the Deutsche Börse, similar to the Turner Prize, because it's about ambition. It's about ambition of the medium, and it's about ambition of the artist. And I think that's what, you know, what the Photographers Gallery did with Paul Womble. They created that ambition, and they found a sponsor, a structure that could make that happen. And that ambition is the critical thing. You know, photography is dead without ambition.
Yeah, and I think that ambition can sometimes be challenging what we consider photography to be. So kind of breaking out of that.
Absolutely.
But also this idea of what artists want to achieve, this idea of might there be an investigation into the art form itself, into the medium, into challenging the rules of how it was done in previous years, or also raising awareness of things that, like Laia was also saying, the invisible, tracing something that is invisible in a different way.
Photography's strength is its own context. It is its own history. That is photography's strength. And how we evolve, how the medium evolves from that. I mean, the medium should never just run away. The medium always exists within its own context. And that's what makes it exciting.
Brett, I felt you wanted to.
Well, I wanted to say to you, we have a lot of talks internally about the perception of the prize. And one thing we always come back to, and I wanted just to ask, as you're here and you've all had a different experience of this, is one thing we're very conscious of is the stress we put you under, setting you up against each other to win, just this single prize. And we wish there was another way of doing it, but we can't see that there is another way of doing it at the moment. But there is a lot of talk at the moment of dividing the prize between all four people, and lots of other notions are flying around, especially given what's been happening with the Turner Prize. So I just wanted to ask you all a little bit to tell us your experience of that, because we feel it as much as you, that on the night, it's a very, very difficult thing for you to experience that. And I know that all of your experiences might have been different. And perhaps, the whole question of whether that's the right thing to do is up in the air at the moment, just generally with all prizes, the Booker, etc. They're all tending to divide them equally between the four nominees. So, the most important thing for me to say is, for us, the four nominations are the most important thing. The quality of those is just as important as the winner and that night. And I really do mean that, because even this year's one, we walk around upstairs, there really is, at the moment, with the four nominees for this year, there's no obvious winner, and nobody would be able to speculate who it might be. So I think it's just the enjoyment, the possibility of opening it up for audiences to make their own decision, to explore four very different practices this year. They couldn't be more different. And giving them that opportunity to, as you were all talking about, seeing how incredibly broad the medium is, and how criticality plays a role in all the work that's up there. But anyway, who would like to say something about my little issue about how it feels to be?
I also found very interesting for the few years the nomination process to the shortlist.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, it's meant to be a project that how you have done in 1 year or something like that. And I remember being pre-nominated like 5 times in a row, and I was a lot of pressure, because it meant that every year I thought, I'm never going to do a project that's good as the one I just did, because that's a lot of pressure, and then you have to go like up and up, and I guess that's good because it kind of like motivates your ambition. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, okay, so validation is very important. The opportunity is great. The show, obviously we're here praising that. But for me personally, at the end of the day, the problem with this situation is that there is a lot of prizes and nominations and all these situations where there's a lot of noise about how well your project is doing. And unfortunately, prizes are one of important ways of getting funding for the projects. And there's just a confusion and not really alignment on, the audience or the public feeling that you are doing well and your project is doing well, where maybe it's great that you've been showcased and published and nominated, but actually you need funding for the projects. And the only way of keep going, besides having a lot of support and, energy and praising, is also finance. And I, we're talking about an award, and I wanted to bring that up because I think it's important. And this idea of maybe, splitting the award or something like that, it could be interesting if we can, obviously have the full award for everybody. I'm not saying that, but you know what I mean. At the end of the day, maybe the solution is something else. But I think it's important to think about that also, when I'm teaching my young students, and they're all the time asking me, so how you do it, how we do it, where we find how to do it, I have to tell them these things. So I think it's important to talk about that.
I think that's a really interesting point also, because obviously competitions and art is maybe something that is sometimes a little bit jarring as well. Peter, did you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I've had the fortune of, I've been in the fortunate position of being nominated and also being a judge of the prize. So it's given me I think, you know, maybe a larger comprehensive view of its dynamics. It's a tough one, because on one hand, within the photographic community, this is the affirmation of the Academy. I mean, this doesn't get higher than this award, getting affirmation from your peers in a broad sense, you know, from curators to publishers to fellow practitioners. And just being nominated is incredible in its own right. To me, the problem comes in with the public's engagement with the prize and the need for the public's affirmation of the prize. There's maybe a gap in that needs to be addressed in some way or another, which it's a tough one to do. You know, it's a people within the Academy's reading of the medium is always going to be different to a populist reading of the medium. It's a tough one. I don't know how I feel about the fact that you can't be nominated. You've got to wait 10 years for another nomination.
No, it's not 10, is it, Anna? What is it? It's 5. It's 5.
Is it 5?
It's 5, isn't it? It's 5. Too long. Donovan, what do you think about splitting the prize equally? I mean, would that really solve anything?
I mean, I guess I'm getting old. I think you win. I mean, I definitely would split the prize if it's collaborative. Absolutely, no question. But I wouldn't split the prize any other way. If the work is done in collaboration, of course, absolutely. But the work is bigger than the artist. So no, I wouldn't split. No, definitely. I'm sorry, I would not split prizes unless it's a collaborative work.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I wonder if there are any questions from the audience as well.
Can I ask a difficult question of Peter, please? Because I loved your work, your new work, Peter. And I wanted to know, did you, of those, the models from Midland that you showed us tonight, were they all the South African ones, or were they the ones from all the 3 cities?
From Europe, States, South
Really?
Africa.
Oh, fascinating. I'm pleased that actually I didn't know that. I thought they were incredibly strong. Now, but when you moved into the photos of your children, of course, you know, we had an exhibition of Sally Mann here. And of course, you know, it does enter that territory. And I'm wondering how you feel about the issues of course, placing your children in that situation. She's had to answer for that for many years. And of course, you know, she answers very, very clearly that it was done with their collaboration and that they, you know, they're still fine with it even after all these years. But, you know, the bloody nose of your boy did remind me of her child with the bloody nose and the tooth coming out, etc. And she's had a lot to answer for. So I'm just wondering, you know, how do you see those issues?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I don't think there's a clear resolve for it. I think it's a personal resolve you have to find within the dynamics of what you work in. I can't give an answer for everyone, but I try not to make it about a power struggle between myself and my kids. I want to be able to photograph them for the rest of their lives. I don't want them to feel that there is an imbalance in the hierarchy in making of these images. So I'd rather miss a moment than exploit a moment.
So when your boy's 14 and he says, "No more, Dad," you'll say, "Okay, lad, that's enough. You know, I won't photograph you again."
Well, you know, the world has changed. This is something else. In the past, you could say, "Okay, fine, I'm not printing this picture anymore," but now as currency online, and there's nothing you can do about it. And even if you take the captions of your subjects, and this is something as a portraitist I've been wondering about a lot. Even if I take the captions of people away from their portraits, which people have asked me to do, facial recognition and Google algorithms still pop them up if you search people. So the era of anonymity gone. It's and as a portraitist, how do you work around this? You know, things like NFTs are interesting because they make the subject, they give the subject a part, the opportunity to be part of the means of production and earning if the image has a life after that. But within the realm that I work in, I haven't found a convincing solution yet.
And you are the only portraitist tonight.
Theory, I beg your pardon?
You are the only portraitist amongst us, really, amongst the three. Donovan, isn't portraitist. So you're facing this issue alone, because I was going to ask Laia or Donovan if they wanted to say anything about what Peter's saying.
Well, I started.
Brad, I would argue I am a portraitist.
Oh, yes.
I mean, just because I photograph buildings doesn't mean I'm not a portrait.
Okay.
I mean, I look at structures and I see people.
Yes.
Well, I actually have this jump from, for me, being very important to portray women who have undergone illegal abortions or have been forced to the repercussions of not having access to it, and what it means to be forever online, as Peter said, that obviously had a influence in the way I photograph them and how we collaborate. And actually that's one of the reasons why the second chapter, besides everything that I explained it, I was avoiding it, because it's forever, and I cannot control what it means to them to be triggered by the fact of seeing themselves again in that situation. So I really wanted to avoid that, and many other, like 100 of reasons why. So it's a really interesting conversation I would love to have with Peter eventually, because I do wonder what's going to happen, with the future of how what it means to portray someone forever, and even not being able to control what's going to happen with the portrait.
And it's such a beautiful thing you said, to photograph somebody forever. It's not possible.
But because Peter mentioned it, by the way, none of you are interested in NFTs, are you?
That's a result. No,
I'm going to
clearly ahead of us.
No, I'm not. I mean, when are we going to have our first Deutsche Börse nominee who only produces NFTs? Anna and I live in fear. We don't even know how to exhibit them, do we, Anna?
No, that's another question at that point. I believe there aren't any further questions in the chat, unless someone has something. They can also raise their hand and we can unmute them. Otherwise, I want to thank you three again for such a wonderful talk, and I'll hand over to my colleague Louise Eliot, who organized this whole event tonight. And thank you so much, Louise, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. My name is Louise Eliot. I'm curator of talks and events at the Photographers Gallery. And I just wanted to thank you all for joining us, especially to our speakers tonight, Laia Abril, Pieter Hugo, and Donovan Wylie. And to my colleagues, especially Brett Rogers and Anna Dannemann, for a fantastic job introducing and moderating this evening's conversation. And lastly, to you all for your ongoing commitment to the gallery. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you, so genuinely thank you. And we continue to be grateful to be welcomed into your homes and to have the opportunity to share the beautiful and important work of these wonderful artists. Anyway, I hope you're all okay. Please keep checking our website for updates on forthcoming program. Our next event in this series will be, as Brett mentioned, in September, so please keep checking our website for more information on that. But in the meantime, we'll be with one of this year's nominees, Palome Basu, on Wednesday, the 4th of August. Again, more information is on our website. So thank you again, and see you all soon. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laia. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much, Donovan. That's great. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Hey.
Because I was listening to the talk. Sorry. Yeah, I'm having a lot of talk. What did they say? Oh, it's interesting. Yeah, no, I loved it. unfortunately, it's like a little family conversation. Well, here was digging into